Mr Kerr.
Well, Presiding Officer, it might be Super Tuesday in the United States, but it's far from a Super Tuesday in this Parliament. Yet another fantasy debate, another grotesque waste of taxpayers' money. And I say again, as I said in a previous debate of this ilk, if the SNP want to indulge their fantasies and speak to each other in their little echo chambers about something that's never going to happen, and publish documents to their heart's content, they should do it at their own expense and not on the public's. £2 million is how much they're spending on all this nonsense. And it really is nonsense. What else could we be debating? Of course, Alistair Allen.
Alistair Allen.
Member for giving way, and note that he objects to any discussion by the elected government of the policy in Scotland. Can I explain why all this stuff...
Could we have Dr Allen's microphone, please? Cards in. Could we have Dr Allen's microphone, please? Dr Allen, perhaps you could just move to a different position because we're using up Mr Kerr's time. Dr Allen, but I'll give the time back. Dr Allen. No, it doesn't work, I'm afraid. Right, there's obviously some problem. Excuse me, there might be some problem with Dr Allen's card, so that might be something to investigate. And apologies that that hasn't been possible. Mr Kerr, please resume.
Well, I'm disappointed that I wasn't able to take that intervention. I am open for business on interventions if anyone else... Oh, delighted to give way.
Ruth McGuire.
Thank Stephen Kerr for that invitation to intervene. The SNP government was elected by the people of Scotland to put forward the case for independence. If we're not to talk about it in this place, if we're not to put it forward, where does he suggest we do it? How do the people of Scotland make the case?
Stephen Kerr.
I've no objection to the SNP making the case for anything. That's entirely the nature of politics. What I object to is the fact that public funds are being used to further a party political objective in an area that is reserved. The Constitution is reserved, and therefore we are wasting our time talking about this fantasy. I will give way.
Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you very much for giving way. But do you agree with me that, Stephen, that it's a waste of taxpayers' money? Same time, it's not SNP's conference in here, is it?
And we need to speak through the chair. Stephen Kerr.
I couldn't agree more. And I thank the member for that intervention. So what could we have been speaking about? Well, our amendment suggests some things. I'll mention some things very quickly. Just from today's newspapers. The Telegraph. Public at risk in Scotland as police... Oh, you can laugh, but listen to this headline. And the member that's leading the laughing, he was the Justice Secretary. And listen to this mess that he left after his time in office. The Telegraph headline, public at risk in Scotland as police funding cuts mean fewer crimes are being investigated. It's a shocking disgrace. What else can we talk about? Another story from the Telegraph. SNP risking patient safety by accepting NHS unions' reduced working demands. The Scottish Government accused of causing more turmoil by cutting the working week. Incredible. We've not heard a thing about this in this chamber. 10,000, the equivalent of 10,000 FTEs, has been negotiated away by Neil Gray, who astonishes me. Here's the Herald. Number of rehab beds up by just 32, despite pledge. It goes on to remind us about what the former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon announced. There'd be this great expansion of rehab beds, 50% over 5 years. And what is it? 32. Should we be talking about that? Because that's life and death for people in Scotland, not this nonsense. Now, what about the Scotsman? There's Ross Greer. I must hear from Ross Greer. It would be such a shame not to hear from Ross Greer.
I appreciate Stephen Kerr for taking the intervention, and champion of correct parliamentary process that he is. If I recall correctly, Mr Kerr had significant objections when the Scottish Government published papers in this series, but didn't bring them to Parliament. And now he's objecting that these papers are being brought to the Parliament. Is it not simply the case that what the Conservatives are objecting to is the fact that the people of Scotland have voted over and over again for a pro-independence majority?
Stephen Kerr.
I'm objecting to the papers. They're a complete waste of time and money. They've got nothing to do with the issues that I'm highlighting just from this morning's newspapers. You should be ashamed of yourselves for thinking that this is a relevant debate to take up 2 hours, whatever it is, of the time of this Parliament, but it only sits in this chamber for 9 hours a week, and we're taking over 2 hours of that time to discuss this. There's more stuff about the police and the Scotsman, and then there's stuff about the NHS and the Daily Mail. Oh, this is the Daily Mail. The NHS waiting time crisis is damaging the economy. A report by the CBI Scotland, and the Fraser of Allender Institute, talking about the damage that's being done to our economy because of the ineffective way in which the SNP are managing the National Health Service in Scotland. Now, it is déjà vu all over again. Someone said that earlier, absolutely right. We hear this all the time. We're getting fed up. The people of Scotland are bored stiff of these debates, this never-ending obsession of the SNP. They should have their conference. I don't know when their conference is due to be held. They should have it soon so they can get out of their system. They can have morning to evening debates among themselves about this stuff. But don't waste the time of Scotland's Parliament on this fantasy. If I'd known, when I accepted the Chief Whip's request, I'm doing the Chief Whip a favour by speaking in this debate, by the way, because had I known that this was going to be another fantasy independent white paper debate, I would have opposed the business motion last week. We should have opposed this business motion. And I think the Bureau should look at themselves very closely. They should look themselves in the mirror, the Bureau, because this afternoon they have allowed this Parliament to withdraw from reality. That's what they've done. Now, I know that Keith Brown wants the SNP MPs to be withdrawn. Mr
Kerr, obviously you'll be bringing your remarks to a close. I have been generous.
I will. I've gone on for far too long already. I have, because I shouldn't be giving airtime and grace to this nonsense of a debate. But Keith Brown, he wants the SNP members.
I did indicate a concluding approach.
I am now concluding by mentioning Keith Brown. Keith Brown, whose bright idea is to withdraw the SNP MPs from Westminster. This whole Parliament, the SNP, have withdrawn from reality this afternoon, and it's a shame and a disgrace. This is a great country.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Thank you, Mr.